if you have a milkshake, and I have a milkshake, and I have a straw, there it is, that's a straw, you see. Watching. And my straw reaches across the room and starts to drink your milkshake. I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
That was the classic scene from the movie There Will Be Blood, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. That scene is where an owner of a parcel of land is going to an oil baron to try to sell the land to prospect oil from it. And he describes how he already has access to that oil underneath that land because he already owns the land all around it, which is taking the proverbial straw and drinking his oil like a milkshake. Brent Johnson describes this in relation to the US dollar. He calls it the dollar milkshake theory, and most recently described on the Wealthy on YouTube channel that the world wants to de-dollarize, but it will take a lot of time. The dollar, the way that it's structured, sucks up all the capital from around the world because it's the reserve currency. And the process to de-dollarize takes a lot of time. Additionally, it will not come out without a major war.
The problem is the global reserve currencies are not about economics, at least not for the home nation. What I mean by that is the global reserve currency from the US perspective is power. It is the ultimate weapon. And it allows the US to get away with things that nobody else can get away with. Now, for the rest of the world, it means they're somewhat subservient to the United States, but from them, it is more of an economic thing because they have to consider the economics of another country being able to print their currency for hard goods, even though their country cannot do that. But at the end of the day, global reserve currencies, it's a power position. It's not an economic. It's a power decision. It's not an economic decision. And no country is going to willingly give it away. It's just never say never, but that's about as close to an impossibility as I can think of.
This relates right back to his analogy, there will be blood. I agree, the US will not go quietly and release this power over everyone else. The dollar is actually not good for the American people, and it's also not good for anyone else in the world. So why does our government keep this ruse going? Well, it's because it's good for those in power only. Good for our government and its allied governments. Good for bankers. Good for corporate interests who get favors from big government. But very bad for the poor and middle class, no matter where you are in the world. The reason is called Triffin's dilemma. Triffin said that any currency based on a single country would have to choose between its own people or the rest of the world. So when the US is in trouble economically, like it is now with the bank failures and inflation, it must choose to save its people at the expense of the rest of the world, or save the rest of the world at the expense of its own people. There's no way around this. This is why other governments are trying to find ways around the dollar. But until then, there is no good alternative outside the dollar to trade in, except gold. And you can see in this chart here, central banks around the world have been accumulating more than any other time in history. This has been happening for almost 15 years, but has been accelerating exponentially recently. And when the Biden administration froze the assets of the Central Bank of Russia, that was a red flag to the rest of the world that they need to get out ASAP. So while reserve currency transfers usually take about 30 years to complete, this may happen slightly sooner, given that we're likely headed toward World War, as well as ramped up pace of de-dollarization. Remember, Triffin's dilemma also states that the reserve currency hurts its own people. We have a number of states returning to accepting gold as currency. That means no capital gains tax on your gold when you exchange it for something else, like buying a home with it. It means paying your state tax in gold if you choose to do so. So internally and externally, gold is quietly becoming the dominant force once again. That all sounds doom and gloom, but if you see where this is going, obviously you need to own some physical gold and silver. I'm not wishing for a gold standard because there will be blood with an official transition. So a 10% allocation is the best bet for insurance purposes. But once the world does shift to that form of money again, which could be anywhere between 5 to 15 years, hopefully not violently, you'll be drinking everyone else's milkshake who owns dollars.
Hey! I drink your milkshake. I drink it up!